Hey guys, this is just to let you know that this podcast is going to be just a little bit longer. Hope you don't mind. I hope this podcast is interesting. This is going to be on Hercules, and I'm just going to talk about it because I'm such a fan of the film. So, hope you guys enjoy. Here we go. Bump. Who put the gladiator? Hercules. Who does things with theater? Hercules. Is he strong? No one's greater. Is he great? Our favorite flavor. Hercules. Hercules. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Movies and TVs on the Ball, and I am feeling mighty today. And one of the reasons why, if you've looked at the title, I am covering Hercules is because the film pretty much came out when I was 9 years old, and I kind of wanted to review it, but I kind of felt like, well, what would be the purpose of reviewing it, but maybe doing it as a double feature with the Kevin Sorbo Hercules that Kevin Sorbo did, and kind of look at the Legendary Journeys pilot episode of Hercules. So join me as I take a look at the Roman and Greek mythology. Take a dive into both Roman and Greek mythology. First up, I present to you Disney's Hercules. Okay, Hercules. Disney was produced by Disney in 1997. I think it was a summer release in June. Uh, it was Disney's 35th animated movie, so it's as old as I am. It was directed by Ron Clements and John Muskett, who also wrote it. It was co-written by, with the help of Don McCanney, who wrote A Bug's Life and episodes of Seinfeld. And the story is by Randy Cartwright, who wrote Incredibles 2, Coco, Cars 3, Fairly Odd Parents, the movie Bolts, and Monsters Incorporated. And John Ramirez from Tarzan, Aladdin. He also wrote Osmosis Jones, which we will get to, Toy Story 2, and The Lion King. And of course, Jeff Snow, who wrote Mulan, Tarzan, and Hunchback. It starred Tate Donovan, who I've talked about in one of my previous episodes on the OC. If you haven't seen that one and just found this video, he was also in The Holdovers and episodes of MacGyver. He was also in Argo, Manchester by the Sea, and episodes of FBI, and one episode of Packet, or it was in the Worth, I think is the other one. Anyway, then you had Susan Egan. Susan Egan plays the voice of Hercules. Then you have Susan Egan, who voices Meg. She was in Spirited Away. She was in episodes of House MD. She was in the Spider-Man 2 video game. She was in Galaxy Quest in 1999. Party of Five. She voices Megara. Recently, she has been in Steven Universe, and she actually goes and does voices for Disney when they need her, for like Disney Speedstrom was her recent work in 2023, and Kingdom Hearts 3. She was in episodes of Modern Family as well, and she was in episodes of Numbers with our friend David Krumholtz from 10 Things I Hate About You. And she was also in 13 Going on 30, to name a few. Then you had James Woods, who voices Hades. You know James Wood from Vampires, Justice League Action, White House Down, the TV series Shark, John Q, and Stuart Little 2, and of course Any Given Sunday. He has been in. Um, he's also he's always there to do work for Hades in the voice of Hades for anything Disney asks him to do, or well, if offers him to do. He was also the voice of Lex Luthor in Justice League Action. He was in episodes of Family Guy. He voiced in The Simpsons as in an episode of this in an episode of season 5 Simpsons where he was um, played in the Quickie Mart. His other works include Jobs. He plays Jack Dortzum, and he was in episodes of ER. Um, Stuart Little 2, where he plays the Falcon. Scary Movie 2, he played Father McPheevy. He was in Rescuers, Recess, School's Out. He was in Play It to the Bone. And he was in Contact, to name a few. And then you had Barbara Barrier, who plays in Nurse Jackie, Pushing Daisies, Law and Order SVU, and Family Ties. And of course, last but not least, but Danny DeVito, who plays Phil. He was in Batman Returns, Twins, Always Sunny in Philadelphia. He was in Matilda. His other works include um, LA Confidentials, Smallfoot. He was in Big Fish, Friends. Andy Austin Powers in Goldmember. He played the famous Mini Me and Otto in the TV of him. He was in Death to Smoochie, and which I think he actually directed. Let's see. Yeah, he directed Death to Smoochie, and he was also in. But you know Danny DeVito. He played Herb Powell in an episode of The Simpsons, and he plays Philatides, to name a few. So let's get to the film. So what we see is in the film is we're in sort of a museum where we hear a narrator say, of all the heroes of mightiest heroes, there was one that stood from top of all of them, and his name is the mighty Hercules. But what makes a hero? And then we are introduced to the muses. And the muses are basically like are goddesses of the arts and proclaimer of heroes. And one of them says, heroes like Hercules, and she fans herself. And then the other one comes down and says, you mean Hercules? And goes down Hercules's kind of neck and it's on a bowl, and she's like, and one of the other muses is like, our story actually begins many eons ago, and we see kind of the story of how Hercules kind of story began, where we see back when the earth was new, and like how the Titans were uh, Titans were coming. Titans came and um, destroyed the earth, and then along came Zeus, and Zeus pretty much trapped him in a tunnel at the beneath the sea, and basically that's kind of the story about how Zeus kind of conquered the Titans. Then we get uh, then we are shown the christening of Hercules, and we're moving up to the sky, and we kind of see the gates of Olympus open, and we see sort of what kind of just this island in the cloud where it's raining, not raining, but so we're at the raining of christening of young Hercules, and and we see like uh, kind of Hera sort of hang out with Hercules, or not hang out with Hercules, but sort of puts him in his crib, and brings her, and then we see Hermes, and Hermes is sort of the deliverer guy, and he's voiced by, I think, the piano player for David Letterman, and he's like, because he's got the sunglasses, and he brings Hera some flowers, and she's like, "Oh, Hermes, they're lovely. Yes, isn't it nutty? I haven't seen this so many people, um, people at this place since Narcissus discovered himself." And you see Narcissus with he's this purple god with this medal on his chest, and he's looking in the mirror and kind of kissing himself, and and then we see Hercules, or not Hercules. We see Zeus saying, "On behalf of my son, um, I want to, thank you for all your gifts." And Hera's like, "What about our gifts?" And he's like, "Well, let's see, a dash of," and he starts making with a bunch of clouds. He makes a Pegasus, and Pegasus comes alive, and his name is Pegasus, and he's all yours, son. And we see Hercules, and Hercules has got sort of this. I guess up there they have glowing. I've noticed that he's got more glowing gold hair when he's in on Earth, or on Olympus, and he's got more brown hair when he's on Earth. Anyway, so and then they start kind of, he's like, "My boy, my lovely Hercules," and then Hades shows up, and he says, "How sentimental." And he says, "I haven't been this choked up since I got a piece of moussaka into my throat, huh?" And you can tell, one thing I can say about it is I love how Hades just, I think it Hades would have been a totally different villain had James Woods not played him. Because I see Hades, I look at Hades and I'm thinking, if James Woods didn't play him, he would be just so unoriginal. But that's just me. Um, and And then, so Hades comes in and he says, "I haven't been this choked up since I got a piece of moussaka stuck in my throat." Huh? Huh? And nobody laughs. And he kind of goes to the Tufts room, And Zeus comes up to Hades and says, Hades, how are things in the underworld? And Hades is like, well, things are fine. They're dark and dandy and, full of dead people. And I like how Hades, uh, and then Hades or I like how Hades just sort of brings the comedy. A sucker for the little sucker, and then this sort of sucker that has like spikes on it. He goes over to give it to her little baby Hercules, and Hercules ends up grabbing Hades' finger, and he's holding on to it, and he's like, he's like, powerful little tyke, and Zeus says, oh, don't be such a stiff. You'll probably work yourself to death. And he starts laughing and saying, "Ha, ha! You said work yourself to death. Isn't that funny?" And Hercules and Hades, as he's walking out of Olympus, he says, "If only, if only." And then the muses kind of come in, and they give you a song about how Hades ruling the underworld, and Hades is basically is kind of get on a kind of a raft being rowed by a looks like a skeleton guy, um, and we see like dead people clambering up through the water of the dead, and Hades uses his firepower to kind of keep them at bay. Then they go through a door, and as they go through the door, we see the three-headed dog, and it's not Fluffy from Harry Potter, but it's pretty close. Starts come up and they start biting, and Hades just throws a piece of meat, and the three-headed dog fights over it. Um, and he gets to kind of the bay of the underworld, and he says, and he's like, pain! And he's the one, Pain, who's this purple looking, devil looking guy, and he says, come here, Mr. Grudius. And then he's like, Panic! And he's like, oh my gosh, Panic. And Panic they kind of look like the devils. Panic looks a little bit kind of like, he's got the pointy ears, real pointy like horns, and kind of square face. And Hades, or Pain, kind of has like long hair, kind of like long hair, but short hair, and kind of would have parted in a way, and he calls Pain, and Pain walks in and says, come here, Mr. Gluteus. And then he shouts for Panic, and Panic shows up, and he starts wandering down, and Panic looks a little bit more kind of like the devil with the long things, and Panic is a little bit more chubbier, but they both have sort of tails, and Panic comes down, trips Pain, trips Pain, and Panic stabs Pain in the buttocks, and he says, Pain! And Panic, reporting for duty. And he's like, fine, fine. And then Hades is like, fine, fine, fine. Just tell me the instant the fates arrive. Oh, they're here. And then Hades just turns on a dime, and flames. What? They're here? The fates aren't here, and you didn't tell me? And he says, we are worms. And I love how they like are groveling and say, we are worms, worthless worms. And they're turning into worms. And he says, memo to me after my meeting. And then he meets the Fates. And the Fates are pretty much they have one has sort of a long crooked nose. The other one kind of looks like an old woman, and the other one looks kind of has one eye like a cyclops. And we see that they are doing a um, kind of a bringing someone into the underworld by taking the mortal thread of human life, or the thread of mortal life, and she takes the scissors and says, and they get to her and he says, hold that mortal's thread of life, and he gets to the scissors, and they put it into the little circle thing and clip it, and um, um, and we hear a scream, and the ghost comes down, and we see like serving 4,000, and it clicks, or like 1 million, and then clicks from 1 million, actually 5 million billion and one over 5 million and one, and it says over 5 million and one served. And as the as Hades shows up, he says, he apologizes, and he says, "I'm sorry I'm late." And the fates say, "We knew you would be. We know everything." Past, and one of them, and the eye goes into one of their eyes, says, "Present," and it goes into the other one's eye, and then the one that has the Cyclops eye, and future. And he whispers to the panic, says, "Indoor plumbing. It's gonna be big." And Hades basically says, so let me get this straight. Here's my problem. I've got Zeus, and Zeus is Mr. High Mighty, hey hey ho, and now he has and the fates interrupt and say, "Bouncing baby brat, we know," and he says, "I know you know," and he's trying to get to the point. And I really like the design of the underworld, just with the way the fates, the way he's kind of got how Hades has got sort of this huge sort of mat about how Zeus is like Mr. High and Mighty, Mr. Hey You, get off my cloud, and he says now he's got a bouncing baby brat, and that's what the fates say. We know, we know. He's like, I know, you know, and he asks him, "Is this kid's going to mess up my hostile takeover?" And one of the fates says, "We're not supposed to reveal the future." And he says, "Well, okay, okay." So, and the fates really don't want to reveal the future and so they kind of, after Hades takes their eyeball and sort of wipes it off and gives it to him, one of the fates says, "Well, all right." And he says, "In 18 years precisely, the planets will line so nicely." And I love how Hades says, verse, "The time will come to release the Titans." And so once he releases the Titans, that Zeus will fall, and Hercules and fall, and Hades will rule all. And Hades gets so excited and says, "Yes, Hades rules." And he says a word of caution to this tale. If Hercules wins, you shall fail. So basically, Hades has to take care of Hercules to get uh, to sort of to take over from Zeus. I mean, that's kind of his main mission throughout the entire film. So knowing this information that Hades can't Hades can't win without destroying Hercules, they go to basically his underground room where he has a vial full of immortal liquid, and he asks Pain and Panic, "How do you kill a god?" And he says, "You can't. They're immortal." And he's like, "Bingo, they're immortal. So uh, how do we turn?" He's like, "Turn the little sunset spot mortal." Then he basically gives Pain and Panic the go ahead to kidnap little baby Hercules from Olympus. And what I like what we see is the night turns into day as a guy is riding a chariot, and the chariot brings the night around the um, around Olympus, making it day and night. So Hera and Zeus are sleeping. Hercules is sleeping in the bed in his crib with Pegasus, and Pegasus is and they're sleeping and and then both Hades or Pain and Panic break in and kidnap Hercules, and they take him down to Earth. And as they're taking him down to Earth, meanwhile, Zeus and Hera hear a uh, creaking and think it's um, it's basically a they hear cracking crown. They go, baby. They go run and check on him, and they find out that Hercules has been baby naps by Pain and Panic. Pain and Panic goes back down to Earth. They fall. They fall. The baby starts to baby Hercules starts to cry, and he's like, "Come on, let's kill the kid and get it over with." And Panic or Pain gets the formula, puts a bottle, basically makes it to a bottle, and says, "Here's some nice juice formula," and sticks the bottle in Hercules in Hades in Hercules' mouth, and he starts changing from godlike to mortal, and you kind of can see the animation just change from like his golden sun looking look to all the way to his human look, and he's slowly changing mortal, and you see him changing from that golden look to normality, and he's like he has to drink the potion every last drop, and he breaks and they say, "Hey, they hear a, "Hey, who's there?" And the bottle breaks, but the last drop isn't drunk, so Hercules keeps his strength. And we're introduced to Amphitryon and Alcmene, and they're like, we prayed for a, we've for years we prayed for the gods to give us a child, and now they have. And they pick up little Hercules, and he's got around his neck the lightning bolts from the sky, and the lightning bolt from the sky, and um, they look at it, and it says Hercules, uh, and Alcmene says, "Look Amphitryon. We prayed for the gods to give us a child, and somehow the gods have answered our prayers. And he's like, Hercules. And he looks at the thing, and Pain and Panic say, Panic says, is this the time now to kill the baby? And he says, now. And so they turn into snakes, and as they turn into snakes, they they turn into snakes. They sneak up behind Hercules and mom and dad, or Anthrophion, and um, Anthrophion and Achilles are scared, but Hercules takes the snakes and grabs them by the head, and because he didn't lose his strength, starts beating them up, tying them into a knot, and sending them out their way, and waves at them. And they're amazed that their son, that this baby can do that. So they end up adopting him, and then fast forward to 10 years later. I guess he's 15 or 18. Hercules is then the muses basically tell us through song about how Hercules grew up to be from a small boy to a teenager, about how Hera and Zeus had to watch from afar as their son grows up. Then we get to where we are in the present day, is taking Anthrophion and Penelope, the mule, down into town with a barrel of hay, and he's just running, and as they're running, Anthrophion is like, Hercules, slow down, um, and as he's going down the the way, he stops, and he stops so hard that he gets stuck in the ground. And Anthrophion looks at Penelope's hooves and says, poor Penelope twisted her leg back there. Now I want you to stay. You know what I need you to do, and Hercules starts unloading the cart, and he says, don't unload the cart. He just says, why don't you, and Hercules is like, I know, stay by the cart. And Hercules, Hercules puts the bale of hay that lifts up Penelope, and Penelope falls into Hercules' arms, and he puts Penelope back on the hooves, or back on the cart, and Hercules is and then Hercules kind of waits for him, and we see a frisbee fly near Hercules's Hercules's frisbee flies near Hercules, and these kids come up to him, and Hercules says, "Hey, do you guys need uh, need another guy?" And they're a little bit sort of kind of like a little bit sort of like concerned, because they're like, well, we really don't want to kind of hang out with Herc because he's kind of a geek, and they kind of make him excuses like, we've already got 5 and we want to keep it an even number, and Hercules does the math and says, wait a minute, five's not an even number. And I've kind of noticed that watching it again, that Hercules has kind of an X-Men mutant story in a way, or at least the adolescence of a mutant, where he sort of feels like he's an outcast. And they say geek, more like, uh, and and I like how he says we've got five, and he says three is an even number. So then he waits by the cart, and the frisbee comes into his direction, and he goes and says, "I got it, I got it, I got it." And then when he gets it, he actually hits his head on a column. The column starts to jingle back and forth, and Hercules is like uh-oh, and he tries to save the uh, cart. Meanwhile, he earlier in the movie, he's trying to help this guy, voiced by Wayne Knight, try with this pot, and he's like, Hercules, I got it, I got it. And so we can kind of tell that there is a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? There's a of I think people are a little bit afraid of Hercules. He's got sort of the X-Men mutant prejudice with him, and he says, "I got it," and he's like, he's got it, and then we go back. Hercules is trying to catch the frisbee. He catches the frisbee, but he hits the column, and because of his strength, the columns start to wibble wobble, and as they're wobbling, they start a domino effect where all uh, the wibble wobble starts to crumble, and they go all around the the area, but it nearly stops right where the cart or the vase guy is, and luckily for him that that it didn't stop his shop from being destroyed, and then Hercules kind of trips and falls right into the guy's shop, and this breaks all his pots everywhere. And as the damage of what happened kind of unravels, he actually picks up the flying disc, and the kid says, "Thanks a lot, Hercules." And Anthephryon is like, "Son, what happened?" And then we hear this man yell. It says, That's the last straw, Anthephryon." And everyone's like, "That boy is a menace. He's too dangerous to be around normal people." So it does have that X-Men feel if you think about it. And also, Anthephryon is voiced by Wayne Knight, who you may know from, he played Dennis Nedry in Jurassic Park. He was also in, he played Newman in Seinfeld. So anyway, just, Troy McClure right there. So anyway, like, that's the last straw at everyone, and everyone kind of starts pointing fingers at him, saying, "That boy is a menace. He's too dangerous to be around normal people." And Anthephryon is like, "Look, he didn't mean any harm. He just doesn't know the limitations of his strength." And then the next day, so that evening, um, Hercules and Anthroporion are sitting by a tree and talking about how he's a freak, and not how he's a freak, but how he's just not normal, and kind of that teen adolescence that I think all kids feel. And sitting next to a tree, and I have the feeling like they talked about how it should be somewhere, and he talks about how he he doesn't think he belongs here, that he belongs somewhere else. So he picks up a rock and skips it and sings, "I can go the distance." I have often dreamed of a far off place where heroes welcome will be waiting for me, where the crowds, that kind of that song. And he sings, "I can go the distance." He climbs the tree looking at the stars, and we see a shooting star. He goes, and then, kind of after his music montage, he goes and talks to his parents, and it's like, "Hercules, we need to tell you something." And they reveal to him that they kept the medal that was around his neck when they found him. And he says this was the symbol of the gods. And Hercules is like, "This is it. This is where I can go. This is where I can go. This is you see, if I can just go to the statue of Zeus, and he can tell me where I am." And he says, "You guys have been the best parents anyone could have." He hugs them, and then heads off to the to Mount Olympus. And as he's headed to Mount Olympus, and he's singing the song "I Can Go the Distance." And it's pretty much, when I watched it as a kid, I thought his journey was a lot longer, but it almost seemed like it was just up the hill when I watch it now, because I guess it's sort of like, let's get to it, let's get to it. Uh, so he goes to the statue of Zeus, where he prays and he says, "Almighty Zeus, please answer me and hand me the please help me and answer my prayers. Where do I belong?" And I was watching Lindsay Ellis did a video on Hercules, and she kind of said that if this was really historically accurate, instead of praying, he would have given slaughtered like a lamb or something in front of the statue of Zeus. And but I think it's more. It kind of takes the mold of more of the Christian way we pray in Christianity. Um, so it's so he says, "Zeus, uh, hear me out and answer my prayer. Where do I belong?" And then the wind blows, and as the wind blows, there fire erupts, and stone opens up, and Zeus comes alive and says, "My boy, my little Hercules." And this freaks out Hercules. Hercules starts running out of the out of the Colosseum, and he says, "Is this the kind of?" And I like how he trips over some candles, and one candle's in his mouth, and he pops it out, and he says, "Is this?" And Zeus grabs Hercules and says, "Is this a way you got to say to your old man?" And he says, and he puts him in his palm of his hand, and says, "Is this the way you say to your father?" And Hercules is like, "Father? You didn't know you had a famous father." And then Hercules puts two and two together. That he says, "Well, if you're my father, then that would make you a god." And Hercules is like, "A god?" And then a god, and he says, uh, starts to come alive. He tells him. And he says, "Well, if you're my father, that would make me a god." And then he says, "Well, then why did you not want me?" And Zeus says, "Your mother and I loved you, son, but you were taken from us by somebody and they made you mortal, and only gods can live on Mount Olympus." So Hercules basically has to, and he says, "Well, how do I get back to?" And Hercules is like, "Well, how do I get back to Mount Olympus?" And he says, "Hercules, to prove yourself, to get yourself back on Mount Olympus, you need to prove yourself to be a true hero." And he says, "You need to seek out Philoctetes, the trainer of heroes. Seek out Philoctetes, he will become a true hero, and his godhood would be restored." And he says, uh, and then Zeus sends him his pet horse Pegasus, who comes from the sky as a beam of light, and comes in and says, "Pegasus is a magnificent horse with a look of a horse and the brain of a bird." And the horse and a Pegasus starts squawking like a bird, and then Hercules basically gets on Pegasus, and they head out to find Philoctetes. Hercules takes Philoctetes, or Hercules goes out to see Philoctetes, starts finishing up the refrain from "Go the Distance," and and um, and so he's like, "And I'll be on my way. I can go the distance. I don't care how far. Somehow I'll be strong. I'll be on." So he sings "I can go the distance" and goes to the island of Philoctetes. And what I noticed watching it now is I thought when I was a kid watching it back when I was 9 that you kind of notice it's kind of the same thing when we talked about with Saturday morning cartoons. The pacing is a lot faster in cartoons when you watch them now older versus when you watch it again. Um, so they fly to the island of Philoctetes, and it's kind of what I like is there's goats everywhere. It's got a little bit of a fog, and Hercules says, "Is this the place?" And uh, Pegasus says yes in Pegasus voice, and they kind of walk around, and we can see statues of fallen. There's like one where they walk into an entrance, and it looks like between a 2 feet. And he says, so they kind of walk around, and they see a little goat. They see a little goat, and Hercules thinks, "Hey, this goat looks stuck." And you find out that the goat is really Philoctetes, voiced by Danny DeVito, and he's been checking out the ladies in the swimming pool, and he's like, "Girls, girls," and he chases them. They all turn into, I think they're nymphs. They all turn into different plants. One of them turns into uh, uh, a, a lay and some plants. Another one turns into a tree where Hercules or Hades or not Hercules, where Phil says limbs. Haha, they can't keep their hands off me, and the limb just smacks him, and he says, uh, and and he says, "Are you all?" And then Hercules goes over to him and says, "Hey, are you all right?" Uh, and he's like, "I'm looking for a guy named Philatides," and Phil has a bowl of grapes, empties out the grapes, and bites the bowl and says, "Call me Phil." And Phil, it's great to meet you. I can't. And since Hercules has strong, such a strong grip, literally, that his hands start to hurt. Phil's hands start to hurt, and then Phil gets licked by Pegasus, and he's like, "Animals, disgusting." And as as Phil is walking to his house, he says he wants to become a hero, and then Hercule and Phil says, "Sorry, kid, can't help you." And Hercules says, "Wait," and he has enough strength that he breaks the door, and he asks him why isn't Phil going to help him be a hero, and Phil says, "I have two words for you. I am retired." And Hercules is like, "That's three words." But anyway, Hercules says to Phil, "Is there anything you wish you had, like a dream that you could want to do?" And Phil says, "Come on, kid. I'll show you. I want to show you something inside." So they go into the Phil's little pad, which is basically an worked out um, statue, next statue of someone's head, and he starts walking up, and Hercules hits his head on the argyle of the mast of the argyle that Jason had to sail, and Hercules and Phil said, "Who do you think taught Jason how to sail? Uh, Cleopatra?" And he says, "I trained all those wimpy would-be heroes." And then he says, "Wimpy heroes," and he says, those wimpy heroes. Odysseus, Perseus, Theseus, a lot of yeses." And he says, "Yeah, every one of those bums try to let me down." And I like the fact that he takes the twister thing, or takes the plate and twists it, and it shows the monster beating the hero down. And he says, "All those bums led me down, and then farther than discus, but none of them could go the distance." And then he talks about Achilles, and he says, "And this guy had it all. He could jab, he could punch." Achilles, that's it. Yeah, the build, the speed. He could punch if I'm given. But that slug of the heel of his, one prick, and he's done for. And I love the fact that I like how Phil basically tings the statue, and the statue all of a sudden crumbles down, and he crumbles it, and then Phil says he did have a dream where he was going to train the best, greatest hero of them all, that the gods would hang his image in the stars, and he takes this this poster and puts it over the cloth, and the cloth looks a little bit like Hercules. And I love how he says, people are gonna look up and say, "That's Phil's boy," and he says, "What are dreams for anyway?" And dreams are for rookies. And then Hercules says, "But you know what? I'm different than that. Here, let me show you." And Hercules takes Phil out, and he grabs one of the statue's shield and wraps it around and round and round and throws it off, and it goes into the ocean. And he says, "Oh, geez," and Phil's kind of amazed that he's got that type of strength, and he's like, he kind of second guesses himself and says, "Well, maybe I could," and he says, "Nah, nah, I don't think so." And then Hercules says, "Look, if I don't become a true hero, I will never be able to support my father, see my father Zeus up in Mount Olympus." And Phil is like, "Wait a minute, wait a minute. Let me get this straight. Zeus is your daddy." He says, "The big guy, Mr. High and Mighty, Mr. Lightning Bolt. Read me a book, Daddy." And he starts laughing. He says, "Once upon a time." And he says, "It's the truth. Oh, please." And then we get into Phil's song about, if you want to be a hero, kid, whoop-de-doo. And he says, "I have two words for you." And the lightning or the clouds come over him and zap him in lightning. And he says, "Okay." And then we get a montage of him um, of doing basically hero training, um, and he brings out his he starts to bring out all his medals and kind of shields and stuff. So this is his sort of Rocky training montage. Hercules gets his first sword, and he gets it stuck in the olive tree, and he breaks the sword. And then he tells Hercules to clean up the uh, garden. He lifts and he gets the goats to mow the training seat, or the training fields, or his training fields. And we see Hercules trying his best to do a bow and arrow, kind of like what Arrow does. And he's struggling and struggling, and and Phil goes and tries to help him get the archery right, and ends up letting go, and Phil with his horns gets stuck in the bullseye. And then he starts to work out. Herc and Phil start to work out, and then what I love is that Hercules is given training to do some push-ups, and as he's doing push-ups, Herc measures his biceps with um, a tape measure, and he, like, by the because they're not moved by the strength, but the strength of his muscle size. So he starts doing midnight uh, push-ups, and then Hercules has to balance an egg in a spoon while walking a tightrope, and it falls on Phil's head, And of course, Phil gets so angry that the egg turns into scrambled egg, turns into a fried egg, which uh, Pegasus eats. Then we see Hercules do some training where Phil says, "Rule number 96: when rescuing a damsel, always be prepared." Rule number 97: um, concentrate. Um, so Pegasus gives him some swords, and he kind of flings the swords at the tries to swing the swords at the peep at his target. He misses the target and almost hits Phil, where we see which was rule number 96 is aim, because he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 swords near Phil's body. Then we see see Hercules uh, uh, rescue a damsel from falling from a cold mountain, and he does rescue her. But when he comes back, the doll breaks, and 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 then Hercules has to do another sword throwing exercise where he throws a bunch of swords uh, at the moving targets, and he misses 4 of them, but he gets one of them, and he says, Peyton Phil says, it's like painting a masterpiece. It's a work of art. And then we see, I love it because they're doing uh, a montage to Karate Kid, where they're doing that step, kind of the step thing, the crane, as it were. And we see Hercules kind of doing the crane. And meanwhile, going through the song, we see Phil measuring Hercules' muscles, and the tape measure breaks, and we see Phil say, "Well, that's more like it." And then Phil gives him kind of a final test. And what I love about the final test is it starts with a bunch of moving saw blades. There's like 4 of them, and then a uh, big giant a big giant clapper that's got spikes in it, and then a fist that comes down and up, kind of like in a video game, and then 2 sharks covered with a damsel over a firing ring. And Phil says, "Ready, go!" And Hercules goes. He swings on the rope, dodges the blades, then kind of comes, does like a split that misses the chomper. Then he takes his fist and it breaks, pushes the sharks away, rescues the damsel out of the fiery pit, and then he has his last task of taking out all these 8 guards. And what I love what he does is he takes the sword, he bends the blade, and he basically uses it as a boomerang, and it cuts off all the heads of the statues. And then I love how the the arrows hit the shield, which makes an H, and for some reason the blade turns into a turns into a uh, boomerang and then comes out. So that's cool. And so Hercules is like, after all this final training, I'm ready to go to Thieves. I want to get off this island. I want to fight some monsters, rescue some damsels, and he wants to go to basically Olympus, and he just wants to get off the island. He wants to rescue some damsels and do some heroic stuff. So they head to Thebes, and Thebes is pretty much like maybe a lot of people and a lot of problems. A real tough town. And before they can go to Thebes, they hear a woman scream. And he says, and I love how Phil says it is, oh, it's your DID, standard DID, damsel in distress. And and Hercules and Pegasus and Phil, this is their first kind of shot at being a hero. And we see Nessus, the river guardian, who's basically a centaur, and then Hercules is told, or Phil is telling Hercules to assess the situation. Don't go in there, all hero-y yet, and just see where it goes. And Hercules kind of, sees the lady in distress and goes and becomes a hero, and he stands up tall to Nessus, and Narcissus, or the River Guardian three leg is, and he's kind of up, and Hercules is sort of up to his kind of out of his league, and he's like, "Pardon me, you good sir," and he says something about like, "I need you to help to keep that um, young woman," and Meg kind of stops him right there and says, "Keep moving, Junior," and um, Hercules is like, "Aren't you like a damsel in distress?" And Megara is like, "I'm a damsel. I'm in distress. I can handle it. Have a nice day." And so we can tell that Megara's got a little bit of spunk. We'll find out later that she does have a lot more spunk. And she says, "I'm a damsel. I'm in distress. Have a nice day." And then the river centaur punches Hercules, and Phil is giving him coaching advice and saying, "What are you doing? Get your sword." And he's like, "Yes, that's right." And so he's looking for a sword in the water, and says, "The hero is better with his sword." He pulls out a fish, and the centaur kind of laughs at him, or River Guardian laughs at him, and the fish gets scared, and the River Guardian punches Hercules in the face. Meg's kind of looking at him like, this guy is really a hero. He just doesn't seem that hero-y. And Hercules gets hit in the sends himself hits in the head, and Phil says, Phil says, or Pegasus goes to the tries to go to the rescue, but Phil says he's got to do it on his own. He's got to do it on his own. And Phil says, "Why don't you just use your head?" And Hercules says, "Ah!" So he literally uses his head. So he gears up speed and he headbutts the River Guardian centaur, and River Guardian the head, and the River Guardian hits the wall of the waterfall, and then I love that he picks her up, or then Hercules picks up Megara and rescues him, and then round number three happens where the uh, Nessus gets up and he Hercules sort of bull rides the centaur, and they kind of wrestle, and he kind of body slams him, and um, Phil is cheering him on, and Meg's like, "Is that guy for real?" And Phil's like, "Of course he real." And, what I love about Phil, or not love about Phil, but what I've noticed about Phil is he kind of tries to be a ladies' man. He notices her, notices Megara, and he says, "Oh, by the way, I'm real too." And he kind of slicks what little hair he has left, and that doesn't really impress Megara, and she sort of tosses him in the water. And then, meanwhile, Hercules is riding Nessus, the river guardian, like a bull, and he even takes off his bandana, kind of wrestling him. And then he goes, he kind of fights him and punches him out. This makes him lose, or not Megara. This makes Narcissus lose all his horseshoes. He falls down. He gets a big lump on his head, and one of the horseshoes uh, kind of rings around his long nostril, which is kind of a cool scene. And then Pegasus sort of, does the final blow by getting um, kind of stomping on the Narcissus head. Then then Hercules asks Phil, "How did I do on my first mission?" And Phil says, "You can do that as a rookie, but this is the big leagues, and next time, don't let your guard down because of a pair of big goo goo eyes." And I love how his eyes turn a different color into blue. And then he starts talking about Megara, and Hercules kind of has fallen for her and walks over to her and says, "How are you?" And this angers both Phil and Pegasus, and Hercules is trying to put the moves on Megara. Megara's not really buying it, and which I kind of think is interesting because I've noticed that she doesn't fall, head over heels. Well, she does in the movie, but she doesn't instantly fall head over heels with Phil and with Hercules, and she kind of gives him the nickname of Wonder Boy. And she and Phil or and Hercules ask Meg how she got caught up in this whole arrangement with the horse boy, as she calls him. And she says, "Well, yes means no, and uh, because of a woman, Hercules starts to talk to Meg. And I love how sassy Meg says Phil and Hercules that, she's kind of sassy by saying, yes means no, and save me, I'm all yours. And he says, Hercules, who is kind of trying to see if maybe this could be his shot to hang out with Meg, says, don't you want, wouldn't you want to take a ride with us? And Hercules or Pegasus gets all mad and flies up to the top of one of the tree branches and snarls. And Hercules and Meg says, "I really don't think your Pinto is gonna like that." And Hercules is like, "Pegasus? Oh, he's fine. He's going to he'll love to take you for a ride." And she's like, nah, maybe not. She says bye, and Hercules waves bye like he's in love. And he's like, Phil, isn't she something? And Phil says, oh, she is something. She's a real pain in the patootie. And then they head to Thieves while Meg looks on. And then Meg walks into the deep, dark forest. And I like how it changes from kind of this really nice, luscious forest to this brown and dark decay of a forest. And Meg sees a bunny and a gopher, and she says, oh, look, a couple of rodents looking for some scraps. And Pain and Panic says, I am a bunny. And Panic says, and I'm his gopher. And they basically transform back into what they looked like. And then we hear Meg, Meg, Meg. And Hercules and Meg is called on by Hades. And I think this is the first time that I think in a Disney animated movie that the love interest was working with the villain in a Disney movie. I don't think that's done before, or ever a Disney princess has ever premiered with the villain. So Hades asked Meg So Hades kind of says, come here, Meg, Meg. And he's like, so, I was trying to get this river guardian, and now I'm river guardian-less. So Hades kind of assumes that Hercules is dead, and that he's been pretty much planning his takeover since then, and he's been kind of growing up the monsters to fight with him. And Meg says, well, it was all fine and dandy where he pretty much needs the river guardian. And he says it was all fine and dandy until, and she says, then Hercules came by, and both Panic and Pain kind of go, doesn't that name sound familiar? And Hades is like, what was that name again? Hercules. And she says, oh, and this fumes Hades. His head lights up from blue, kind of like a gas light, to like white hot. And Hades and Meg kind of sees he comes. Meg kind of says, he comes by with all this charm and farm boy charm and attitude, but I could see that coming from a mile a minute. And then Pain and Panic are like, wait, wasn't Hercules that kid we were supposed to take care of? This pisses off Hades by saying, you were supposed to take care of him. Dead as a doornail was your exact words. And I love that line where he's like, does and he's grabbing him and he says, "Yeah, remember all that time when you were looking for that guy named Jason, and all those people were named Brittany? Wasn't that a coincidence?" And then Hades says, "Look, I'm about to rearrange the cosmos, and the only person is that can stop me from doing it is raving around, waltzing around the earth." And Hades pretty much throws a tantrum, a literal fiery tantrum, and blows out all the forest. And then Pain and Panic says that we did kind of stop him from being, trying stop him from being a god by making him mortal. So Hades says, fortunately, we'll be able to right wrongs and make up for this mistake for the four of us, and then for the three of them. So then, meanwhile, uh, Hercules and Phil finally make it to Thieves, or as Phil likes to call it, the Big Olive itself. He says, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. And it looks a little bit like kind of New York from the 90s. Like we see a guy standing kind of standing, kind of there's like a walk, no walk, where a guy's has a pot that turns from green to red, and they're walking across the room, or walk across the floor, or walking across the street, and he says it's a dangerous place, and one of these chariots that's flying, he says, watch it, numbskull, and Phil says, I'm walking here. Then they are walking down the steps and they see a guy who says, and he's kind of a creepy and he's got kind of a coat on, and he says, "Hey guys." And he flashes him, but he has a bunch of sundials. He says, "Wanna buy a sundial?" And he said, and Phil is like, "All right, beat it, beat it." And then there's a guy who says, "The end is near," and he's wearing sort of a column as pants, and he starts hugging uh, he starts hugging the horse, hugging Pegasus, and Phil says, "Just don't look at anybody. Stare at the ground. Stare at the ground." And he says that people here are nuts, and because they live in a city of turmoil. And we see what I've noticed watching it again with is we get to see Atlas, a statue of Atlas, where it's and as we're going into sort of the water well, where we see three, 5 people standing in front of the watering hole, and they saying we've lost everything in the fire, and one of the men who's just gotten out of the fire says, "Yeah, except for Snowball here," and Snowball goes meow, and one of the other guys says, "Wasn't the fires before the flood, or after the earthquake?" And she's like, and one of them who's really nervous and twitchy with a can or with a pot, and she's kind of twitching with it. It was after the or. And then one of the other ones is Toothless, says, "Don't get me started on the crime." Hercules and Phil listen to this, and Phil says this is your chance to really sort of showing them that they're a hero, that he can be a hero. And and I love how one of the other guys says, every time I turn around, there's always a monster, and the guy that survived the fire says, all we need now is a plague of locusts, and a little locust shows up, and this sort of freaks out these people, and he says, "That's it, I'm moving to Sparta." And then Hercules says, "Excuse me, it seems to be all you guys need is a hero." And he's like, "Yeah? And who are you?" And he says, "I happen to be a hero." And then they start questioning his heroic abilities by asking him, "Have you ever stopped an earthquake?" He asks them if he's ever saved a town before or reversed a natural disaster. And they're like, "No, no," and he's just some chariot chaser. And they start walking off, and Phil says, "Don't you pea brains get it? This is the genuine article." And then we see them look at Phil saying, "Hey, isn't that Philatides the one? Isn't the goat man that trained Philatides?" And so I've noticed that watching it again, that Phil is sort of being sort of structured as sort of the laughing stock of the town of thieves because of what happened to Achilles with his heel. And this pisses off Phil, and Phil starts turning red. And one of the big guys looks at him and says, "He does look like Philatides." And nice try on those heels. And Phil starts getting mad, and he goes over to he starts kind of like getting ready to jump on on one of the guys, and he does, and he starts beating the hell out of this guy, and Hercules takes him off Phil while he's already bitten some of this guy's clothing. And he says, "Aren't you crazy?" And one of the women says to Hercules that we need an actual hero, not an amateur. And Hercules goes over and tries to kind of reason with him. They walk off, and then all of a sudden Meg shows back up and says that there are kids in the gorge, and then Phil says what you need is a chance, and all you need is a catastrophe. Meg shows up all of a sudden and says, "Hercules, Wonder Boy, you're here. I need your help. There are kids that are trapped in the gorge. They were playing." And what I love is Hercules says, "Kids?" in the gorge, trapped. And he goes over to Phil and says, Phil, this is great. And Meg's like, you're really choked up about all this. And he says, yeah, let's go. And then we see that Hercules gets on Pegasus with Meg, and Meg's like, I really don't want to ride on your horse because I have a fear of heights. And Pegasus, who kind of feels like the jealous ex-boyfriend sometimes in this movie, gets really mad, or gets sort of like Pegasus pretty much gets jealous, and he notices that Meg is pretty much scared of heights, so he uses that as an advantage as they fly up to to rescue the kids. As the townspeople runs to the gorge, Phil goes over and says, "I'm behind you. Don't forget, I'm behind you, kid. I'm behind you. Oh, I'm way behind you, kid." And then, meanwhile, uh, Hercules and Meg, who looks disheveled, get off Pegasus, and they hear the two boys screaming, "Help! Somebody!" And I love the line where he says, "Help! Somebody call IXII," which is 911 in Roman numerals, and how they're suffocating. Then Hercules springs into action, slides down, and he says, goes over to the boulder, and he says, "Kids, you're gonna be all right. Get us out, get us out." And as the townspeople come by to kind of look, and what I love about it is that the sculpture of the scene is pretty much kind of looks like the bowl, like kind of a way for a crowd to look at kind of as sort of a kind of the way it's shaped looks like it could have been an old arena, and the way it looks. And then Hercules looks at the boulder and says, I can lift it," and he starts to lift it, and he lifts it. And this really impresses Meg. And the boys come up, and one of the boys says, "Gee, mister, you're really strong." "Jeepers, mister, you're really strong." And Hercules says, "Just be careful next time." "Okay, kids, sure will." And they run off to see Hades, and we find out that they're both pain and panic as kids. And Hades is like, and Hades is like, "Lovely performance, boys. You guys did a great job." And then I love how Panic says "Jeepers," and Hades Pain says, "I was going for innocence." And I love how Hercules, and I love what Hades says, "And you guys did two thumbs way up," which was a Roger Ebert thing that he would say when he would review a movie, and way up for our leading lady girl. And Meg's like, you need, kind of says to herself, to Herc, that he needs to get out of there while you still can. And Hercules is like, I did it. And he says that, and then Phil is like, "I hate to burst your bubble, but I don't think that was applause." And out comes, out of the cave, a growl. And in the cave assumes something sinister is about to happen. That's when a giant purple monster comes out of the shadows. It is the Hydra, which is CGI that looks kind of great for for the time, but now looks kind of very dated. And the Hydra shows up, and I love the design because it's purple, and it's kind of got like a square, kind of a square face. And so the first thing he does is, and we see him kind of, yell and distort his face, and Phil says the next thing you need to do is just two words, am scray, and he runs off. And Hades says it's time to let's get ready to rumble. And then the Hydra comes after Hercules, and as he's coming after him, he uses his sword, and in the same motif as uh, Mickey in Rocky, Phil gives him some pointers into how to defend himself against the Hydra. So the Hydra lunges at Hercules, and Hercules loses his sword, and Hercules has to go get his sword. And as the Hydra's basically chomped on some, got his mouth stuck, and Hercules throws another boulder at the Hydra, and that doesn't do anything because the Hydra breaks the boulder. And he starts to snarl and laugh. Hercules uses his feet, uses his hands to sort of stop the Hydra from eating him, and try to get close enough to Hercules' sword. And he kind of gives him a neck kill, and Hercules then tries to get to the base, but the Hydra's tongue wraps him over his ankle, and the Hydra swallows Hercules whole. And as Hercules goes down the esophagus of the Hydra, which is kind of gross, and we hear a belching of the Hydra, and Hydra thinks he won it all when all of a sudden he hears a scream and yells at the townspeople, but then all of a sudden we see the sword snap the Hydra's neck off, and the head falls down into the crowd, and the people run. And then Hercules, who's got a bunch of Hydra gunk on him, walks out and says, "Phil, I did it." And then he says that wasn't so hard, and then he says, "Come on, Phil, we're gonna get you cleaned up." And at this moment, both Panic and Pain are panicking, and Hades is like, "Check it out, don't worry about it. It's only halftime." And then we see the three heads coming out of the Hydra, and Hercules then has to. Hercules is given back his sword, and he starts getting chased by the Hydra. He whistles for Pegasus to come and rescue him, and the Hydra's heads try to get to Hercules' face, and it's a cool scene because he starts once he knocks out one of the Hydra's head, another one, two more pops up. So he sees another one, knocks it off. Four more come out and knocks him off. Four more, knocks him off, knocks him off. And then there is like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, like 15 or 16 or 18 or 20, somewhere around there, of heads there. And Hercules is like, oh my god, what do I do? What do I do? And I love how Phil says, forget the head slicing thing. So he basically goes around to the he goes around the I think the number of heads are there, and I counted the first time watching this that there are 22 heads on the Hydra. Hercules must cut off. The Hercules must cut off. Phil tells him to forget the head slicing thing. One of the heads bumps each other and knocks Hercules down down a rock, where Hercules is basically in between a rock and a hard place. When Hercules sees the takes all his strength and hits the boulder that he's in, and the rocks crumble on the heads. Now I do like what they did is that they knocked her when they knocked when the the Hydra knocks Hercules off. We get to see sort of him go through the heads, through the necks of all the Hydras, and it's a pretty cool scene. He gets on a rock where I left off. He then gets in between a rock and a hard place with all like the heads looking at him, and it's a cool scene. And I love what Hades says. This is the favorite part of the game, sudden death. And all the heads come up, and Hercules thinks, oh, I'm done for. But he says, oh, wait, I have all the strength. While the Hydras are about to attack and eat him, he ends up taking with all his strength, knocking out the boulders. This knocks out all the heads of the Hydra, leaving them dead, with Hercules in the clutch of his palm. Then, when the rain has stopped, they start looking at him, and I love how Phil says, just like Achilles. Hades says, game, set, match. And he pulls out a cigar and Matt lights it, and Phil, feeling like something's bad's gonna happen, he turns around, and in all his might, Hercules opens up the fist of the dead Hydra, revealing that he did survive the ordeal. And then he won the and then the crowd looks over and starts to cheer. And then the crowd puts Hercules on their shoulder, carrying him, and feels like, you did it, kid, you did it, you beat the Hydra. And then we get back to the muses, who say, after that event, things change for Hercules, and what I love is also that Hercules or Hades is smoking a cigar, and as he's smoking the cigar just goes, and he's holding the heads of the Pain and Panic, and they start burning. And I like how Meg says, Wonder Boy, you did it. So then we go into the second song or third song, I think, where Hercules goes through I think it's called in the um, in the I think in the Greek mythology it's his uh, what is known as the 12 labels, which labors, excuse me. This is what we call, after he defeated the Hydras, Hercules goes through the 12 labors, which was and this is all part of Greek mythology. Uh, he's slaying the Hydra as Hercules' nephews, and uh, so he slays the lion after the Hydra. Then he slays the nine-headed Hydra. The lion, I think, is next. I don't know exactly how, but in Greek mythology, it's the lion, the Hydra, the hen, the boar, the Orogan, the bird, the bull, the Dimondus, the great Hypatia. So I think the Hercules, the movie, that was sort of the seven things that usually Greek mythology, but I think they sort of broke it down into three things. And what I love is he's like Greek person of the week in every Greek opinion poll, but and how he goes up and how he goes through kind of becoming famous by chiseling the boar, or chiseling his name in stone. And then, so the first thing he goes up against is the boar. He takes on the boar. So the boar's the first one he takes on. Then he takes on the next one he goes after is the water snake or serpent. In Zero to Hero montage, we see a play done about the Hydra event. We see him drink cups of HERCULESE, which is Gatorade. So there's kind of so they did kind of take a little bit of Michael Jordan into this, into the way Hercules is portrayed. Uh, and then we see his adopted parents get a Coliseum, and and uh, and he gets a statue and made from him. He gets his own credit card, Grecian Express, which was kind of a nice joke. And I love how the girls are, cheering him, kind of singing his song. He knocks out a lion that looks like Scar. Um, and he gets a 10 for 10. There's a Hercules store where people have an action figure of him, as well as He takes on the bird, which I think is known as the. We see kids get sandals like air hooks. He takes on a snake monster, and then we get more into the song, and he says, Who put the gladiator? Hercules. Who was the one in the theater? Hercules." We see them uh, play a play a theater, and then kind of see him watch a play of the events of what's happening with the um, Hydra, and then we see after the play scene, he's made Herculade. His parents have now gotten a bigger house with a bunch of pots and a golden what is it called? Chariot. And then as they start singing, he's got Air Hercs, which was a kind of a thing with Air Jordan back in the day. Um, and then he takes on a Minotaur, a Griffin, and a Medusa character like nothing. And then he stops a what is it called? He stops a volcano with another rock, and he also gets his name uh, in the Greek Chinese theater, and then he gets a statue made of him, and so everything's going great for Hercules, but this pisses off. Um, this pisses off Hades, who's like, I've thrown everything about him, and nothing can defeat him. And one thing I've noticed is that he uses uh, pain and panic to um, throw vases at out um, as target practice, like skeet shooting. And he says, "I've thrown everything at Hercules, and it doesn't even faze him." And then I love how you hear squeaky, squeaky, and he looks down at Pain, and Pain is kind of Pain's like, I'm wearing these sandals that say Air Herc, and he says, and the thing that he's been setting up for about 18 years will go up in flames. And he says, and you have been wearing his merchandise. And he gets angry and turns, and he starts burning. And then I love how you hear squeak, 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 and it's Panic is drinking Herculade out of a cup, which I swear I think back when I think Burger King or Disney or Burger King or McDonald's was doing promotions, you could buy like a plastic cup with Hercules' face on it, and he's drinking the Herculade out of the cup, and he says he kind of sees Hades mad, and he says, "Thirsty?" And this sort of and this is just a small rupture to see what down at where Hercules is, and then and I love how Meg sort of kind of says, you've been throwing. He's been hitting everything you've thrown at him, uh, and kind of giggles and says, "You've been throwing everything. Looks like your game is over. That Hercules is hitting every curve he's got, And Hades thinks maybe Meg is the key to Hercules' weakness. Hades says every hero has a weakness. And he refers to Pandora had the box. He refers to the Trojans had the horse. And he suggests that Meg is Wonder Boys, as he calls it. And Meg is like, look, I've sworn off manhandling. And we find out through explanation that Meg sold her soul to Hades to save her boyfriend's life, but her boyfriend, for repayment, who ended up walking out on her, and we see this in sort of a kind of a mirage where he was with, where in smoke, where Hercules, where he saved his life from basically her ex-boyfriend cheated on him and she ran away, and then ended up walking out on her. He makes a deal with her for Hercules' weakness. He will give her freedom. That night at the Colosseum. So basically, that night, Zeus is basically Hercules is talking to Zeus about talking about he has that he has fought during, I guess, the week, while sort of showing how he defeated the monsters using Pegasus as a body double. And he's like, I, wrestled, I, chokehold one of the monsters. And then he's showing Zeus, and Zeus is so proud of him, and he says, "You've done wonderful. You really have, son." And he kind of says, "I guess this is," and Hercules is like, "I guess this is the time for me to, for me to reunite with the gods," and Hercules thinks this is the time that he is going to get to rejoin the gods on Mount Olympus. But Zeus says that you haven't become a true hero. And Hercules is like, but I think that but Father, I have defeated every monster that I have come up against. And he says, look, I'm the most famous person in all of Greece. He says, I'm even, and he pulls out, I'm an action figure, and he pulls them out, and the button on the action figure kind of pops off his biceps. And says, I don't think being famous is and then Zeus says, I don't think being famous is the same as being a true hero. And Zeus says, it's something he has to discover for himself, and he needs to look inside his heart. And Zeus leaves. And this kind of pisses off Hercules. His heart, and Zeus leaves. This angers Hercules. And he slams his fist on the ground. The next day is Hercules is at his palace, or at his sort of home in sort of Greasily Hills, where Hercules is getting his portrait done on a vase, which he's standing there with. And he has like he's standing there with like Scar. It looks like a lion's face, and he's got a sword and his shield. And meanwhile, Phil is telling him everything he has to do for all his plans for today. And Hercules is like, Phil. And then Phil says you've got a date with some Amazons, and then Hercules is like, Phil, what is the point? And he slams the uh, lion's mane off, which is a lion's mane off, and this angers the painter of the vase, and he gets mad and destroys the whole vase that he's made, and he just says, "I quit." And Phil is like, wait a minute, you can't quit." And he says, "Yes, I can." And he throws the the painting palette on Phil's head, and this makes Phil look like a clown because he has paint all over his face. Okay, so uh, then Phil's like, "What do you mean? What's the point?" And he says, "Don't you want to go to Mount Olympus, don't you?" And he says, "None of this is getting me anywhere." And he throws the lion rug down. Keynote: one thing I love about this scene is that the lion looks a lot. It basically is Scar, and if you remember in the if you remember in The Lion King, Zazu says he would make a great throw rug. And anytime he gets out of line, you can slap him up, you can wrap him up and beat him. And Mufasa's like, Zazu. And I kind of think that 4 years later, Scar um, became a throw rug for Hercules. So that's a nice little. Phil says, "You can't give up now. I'm counting on you." Phil says, "I've seen it all." And he says, "This is the honest to God truth. But you have something I've never seen in anybody." And Hercules is like, "Really?" And he says, "Yeah, I can feel it even deep down into my stubby little toe." And he says, "There's nothing you can't do, kid." Then that's when the door opens and a bunch of gaggling girls scream. They're his Hercules' entourage, and he and they start just clamoring all over him, pulling his things, even taking his headband. They wrestle him down to the ground, and Hercules says, "Phil, can you help me?" And he says, "Escape plan B." He blows his little horns, his little flute, and he says, "There he goes, girls. He went that way." And on the veranda, and they all run after Hercules. And this is when Meg shuts the door and kind of gets to have some time alone with Hercules. Now, I do have to say, I'm going to discuss. I do love that the animation of the outside of the inside of the interior of the castle looks really great for 1997. Uh, Animation just looks gorgeous in Blu-ray, and so Meg comes in to the room, and she goes over to a curtain and sees Hercules' feet hanging from the counter, and says, "Looks like who's in curtain number 1." And Hercules is trying to get his and then Meg asks Hercules if Phil would not mind if you could play hooky this afternoon. Hercules thinks, no, because Phil has this whole day booked, and Meg pressures him, and uh, Hercules and Meg sneak out later that evening after dinner and a play. They are talking about the Oedipus thing, and I love how Hercules says, "Oh yeah, man, I thought even I had problems." Um, and then Meg half smiles and is told by Pain and Panic to try to discover Hercules' weaknesses. Meg starts to fake weak ankles and carries her to a bench. She sees if Hercules has any weakness of her own, and she's basically kind of sitting there, kind of in a flirtatious and like, do you have any weaknesses like weak ankles, and moves her feet up to her as by questioning if he has a trick knee. He tells her uh, that he's fit as a fiddle. Then Hercules goes and skips a rock at the pond, a callback to the I Can Go the Distance montage. But that's what I just noticed. It ends up breaking a statue, creating the Venus de Milo. There's a shooting star in the air, and uh, I do like how when the Venus de la Milo is formed, Meg pretty much says, "I like it that way. I like it. It looks better that way." And um, and then Hercules says, starts to talk about how when he wanted to be anything, when he was a kid, he wanted to be exactly like everybody else. And Hercules, and Meg says, "You want to be dishonest and petty?" Hercules thinks that not everyone's like that, and certainly isn't like that. And Hercules tells her that she's the most amazing person with weak ankles he's ever met. And I kind of like watching it again. I kind of realize how Hercules has, it looks at how good the looks how good the how there is good in the world, in everybody, and Meg looks at it as if there is that everyone is a is that everyone has something to to be misled about. And Hercules says, "When I'm with you, Meg, I don't really feel alone." And when and Meg says, "Well, at least that when that happens, nobody can really hurt you." And Hercules is like, "Well, what do you mean?" And Hercules says, "No, I would never ever want to hurt you ever at all." And they go in for a kiss. And while they're about to kiss, we see Phil shows up with with Pegasus that has a light on his head and kind of using his wings as a helicopter. And Phil has a megaphone saying, break it up. You guys don't need to be." And then Hercules is sent to the stadium to work out for Phil because he's going to have the best workout of his life, or the worst workout of his life. And then then he says goodbye to Phil, or says goodbye to Meg, and Meg basically this is where Meg starts her own personal song. What I do love is that Hercules gives Meg arose out of a tree, and he like basically falls down a tree and gives her like a flower, and the tree just snaps back, and he then goes and kisses Meg on the cheek, and her while um, Phil is um, telling him to go, go, go. Hercules gets back on the horse and he starts looking googly eyed at Meg as she fades into the distance. And Phil says, watch the road, watch the road." And he gets smacked by a tree, and Phil, and meanwhile, her, or Meg is starting her own song where she talks about how she sings her song about how she isn't going to fall in love. And this is kind of a nice singing moment where we get to see her kind of, have her kind of moment of, kind of, did I really find the right guy in my life, or have I not? And then and so she sings her song, and it's a pretty catchy song, and it's kind of got this sort of gospel soul feel to it. That kind of thing, and she starts singing her song, and it's so she ends up singing her song, and then after she sings her song, Hercu or um, after she sings her song, and she sort of she starts to fall for Hercules after her song's done, and then the statue opens up, and we reveal that it's Hades. So they sing their song, and I think this is the first time in the film that the muses actually contribute to the story, other than telling the story. Then the um, uh, statue erupts, and Hades shows up, because I guess that's how he can appear from getting out of the underworld. And he asks Meg what is the weak link in Wonder Boy's chain. And Meg basically says, get yourself another girl, I am through. And Hades is like, then Hades says, uh, "Oh, I've got something in my ear. What'd you say?" And she's like, "Read my lips. Forget it." And then he's like, "Meg, Meg, 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 are we forgetting some final detail that I am?" So, and he yells and says, "I own you," and turns into flames. And this is when Phil wakes up and he overhears that Meg and Hades is working together. And Phil says this is going to break the kid's heart. And meanwhile, Hades and Meg are talking about, that how Hercules is just another guy, that he's going to break his heart. But Meg is like, this guy is different. And I love how Hades says, "Come on, he's a guy." And then Meg says, "Oh, by the way, he doesn't have any weaknesses. You can't beat him." And I like how she's kind of holding the flower, and Hercules and Hades just says, "I think I found Wonder Boy's weakness," without really telling her. So then Phil so then we see that the planets are aligning like they said. And then Phil goes to the Colosseum and he is torn up about what he's about to reveal to Hercules. As he's walking down the stairs, I love how he just slowly pets Pegasus's face, and he just kind of, slicks back his hair, and he goes over to Hercules and says, I gotta tell you something. And Hercules is already on cloud nine, and it's almost like he's got this giant balloon, and um, and he says, I can't stop thinking about Meg, and he's he's he lies on the pole, and he's like, this is so great, and she's something else. And Hercules is just so feeling so good about himself that Phil is like, Hercules, I'm trying to tell you something, and it's like, how can I feel so good about something when I'm feeling so up? And he basically jumps up and uh, comes down. He basically flies like Superman. Meanwhile, the Pegasus sees a female Pegasus, and it turns out that it's not her. It's it's not really a Pegasus, but it's Pain and Panic disguised as a Pegasus. Because I think that they can just disguise themselves as anything they want. Um, so Pegasus goes into the stable where the female Pegasus is at, and the female Pegasus splits in two, and they reveal that it's Pain and Panic, and they capture Pegasus, and Hercules is still on cloud nine. He comes down from the sky, and Hercules and Phil says, I have to tell you this, but she's a fraud. She's playing you. She's playing you, but Hercules says, what, is she a dream come true? More prettier than Aphrodite's? Boss, and he's like, she's the most wonderful girl I've ever been with, and then Phil just lets it out and says, she's a fraud! She's been playing you like a sap. And Hercules is like, come on, she's not. And Phil is like, I'm not kidding around. A she is playing you. And Hercules is saying, look, the point is, I love her. And uh, and Phil says, yeah, but she don't love you. And Phil rips his heart by saying that she's a fraud, that she's been playing him for a sap this whole time. And Phil basically says, she doesn't love you. She's been playing you, Hercules. And Hercules still is in denial, saying, you're crazy. Phil says, she's nothing but a two-time no good lion scheme. And Hercules gets really mad and says, shut up, and hits him and just smacks him across the into a bunch of exercise equipment. And this sort of breaks. I love it how, I mean, I don't love the scene, but I love how this sort of really breaks the friendship between, or for the time, the friendship between Hercules and Phil a little bit, and says, and uh, and then because Hercules' strength slaps Phil, it knocks him into a bunch of exercise equipment, and you can kind of see the look on Phil's face, or on Hercules' face, that, look, what have I done? And he wants to apologize, and Phil is like, um, fine, you don't want the truth, then you can just face it yourself. And he walks off. And what I like about it is that he just says, fine, if you want to face the truth, I'm leaving. I'm going to Thieves. And I then Hercules starts to work out, starts lifting weights, um, and then there's this kind of a small moment where Hercules is, or not Hercules, Phil is basically looking at Hercules and saying, I thought you were going to be the all-time champ, not the all-time chump. And then he leaves. And then this is where we get into sort of the Disney villain time. We're at the 3/4 of the way mark, and Hercules and Hades. What's interesting about in this film is that Hercules and Hades never meet until an hour and 7 minutes into the movies, and this is also hour and 33-minute film. So it's interesting how that works. So Phil and or Hercules and Hades meets, and he says, Lord of the Underworld, how are you doing? And Hercules is like, no, I'm not really, kind of like a kid uh, paying into peer pressure. And Hercules, which doesn't really make sense if you think about it, because if Hades is or is Zeus's brother, Hercules is Hades' nephew, and how is it possible that he's never heard of Hercules until they meet in 18 years? But I think that's just kind of interesting. But anyway, Hercules is this is the first time Hercules and uh, Hades meets. Uh, Throughout the entire film, or actually have any conversations with Hades, and which so that's like happening, like, I guess in uh, an hour and 7 minutes into the film, with only 25 minutes to go into the film. So anyway, sorry, the mic was a little messed up. So anyway, Hercules. And I like what um, Hades does, is that he starts to use some of Hercules' equipment to kind of talking about being in their way, talking about being in his way. He gets really mad at him, and Hercules and Hades gives him sort of the ultimatum to just take a day off. And Hades says, um, or Hercules says, I'm not gonna take a day off, and Hades kind of snaps his fingers and says, I have a little leverage to give you. And we find out, or through Hercules' eyes, that Meg has been working with with Hercules, or with Hades. Hades has been working. Meg has been working with. Meg has been working with Hercules in Hercules' eyes. And don't you? most of the movie. Hades gives him a deal, and so what I like about it, the scene is he's so Hades or Meg tries to tell Hercules that he's been working that don't listen to Hades and Hades snaps his fingers and this basically bounds and gags Meg. So we know now that Meg has gone from a really strong female character to a damsel in distress that gets rescued. But what I kind of enjoy about it is that she's strong, but I think that she is I think that kind of Hades has got more clout over her than anything. Anyway, so Hercules says, let her go, and Hades says, look, she's been working for me this whole time, and for most of the motive, Hades gives him the deal of, look, Hades is like, look, check it out. If you give up your strength for 24 hours, let's just say the next 24 hours, and I'll let Meg go, and unless Meg gets hurt, and she's like, well, and Hercules is like, and if Meg gets hurt, you get your strength back. And then we'll be safe from harm and everything will go back to normal. Hercules asks if people are going to get hurt. And Hades says, nah, I mean, and Hades says there could be a possibility in that Hades kind of tells Hercules, don't you think Meg is more important than anybody else? And he goes over to Hercules, or goes over to Meg and kind of squeezes her cheeks a little bit. And um, she will not be hurt by any harm. And he says, fine, I will. And Hades gives out his hand to shake Hercules' hand, and Hercules is a little bit is a little bit kind of concerned that he can do it. Then he says, going once, going twice, going 3 times, and Hercules says, all right, and he shakes Hades' hand, and Hercules loses his strength, and we see Hades throw the dumbbells onto Hercules, and Hercules, because he's turned mortal again, he loses his strength, and he says, and he goes over to Hercules and says, doesn't it feel great that everything is now just so peachy? Isn't it? Just peachy. And Hercules says, you swear that she will not be hurt by any harm. And he says, fine, I will. And Hades gives out his hand to shake Hercules' hand, and Hercules is a little bit is a little bit concerned that he can do it. Then he says, going once, going twice, going 3 times, and Hercules says, all right, and he shakes Hades' hand, and Hercules loses his strength, and we see Hades throw throw the dumbbells onto Hercules, and Hercules, because he's turned mortal again, he loses his strength, um, and he says, and he goes over to Hercules and says, "Doesn't it feel great that everything is now just so peachy, isn't it? Just peachy." And he says, "Meg, a deal's a deal, that you're off the hook." And this basically gives Meg kind of a chance to become the female character again. And and then Hades reveals to Hercules that Meg was an actress the whole time. And um, Hercules, and then so this sort of baffles Hercules. So anyway, Hercules ends up making a deal with Hades that he will give up, if he gives up his strength for 24 hours, which is pretty much the next 24 hours, that he'll let Meg go, if only if and Meg will not get hurt, and she'll be safe from harm. And we find out, and Hercules also finds out that both that Pain and Panic were in on it. And what's interesting about when Hercules, looking at the artwork or the color, especially on the Blu-ray of Hercules, when he loses his energy, loses his strength, he's pale and white, you know, and he looks weak. And then the so they basically make fun of him, and then Hades heads up to Olympus to the castle, or take over Olympus from Zeus. And so now this is sort of where we're getting into what is known as villain time in Disney movies. In a lot of Disney movies, um, there is sort of what I call the third act villain time. This is where, if you look at, like I said before, Aladdin turns into Jafar turns into the genie. Aladdin, uh, Ursula gets control of the trident in Little Mermaid. In Hercules, and this is pretty much basically in most of all Disney animated films of the 90s and the Renaissance era. So anyway, this is where Hercules or Hades goes. So he goes to the end of the ocean where the Titans are kept, and he says, "Brothers, Titans, I'm here to release you. Who put you down there? Zeus. And what are you going to do about it? Destroy him." And we see the arms. And uh, let's talk about the uh, way the uh, Titans are made of. And we find out that according to Hades, who says, "Brothers, who put you down there?" And he says, "Zeus." And are you going to? What are you going to do? Destroy him? And we kind of get to see the so we see that they're at the bottom of the sea. The Titans out of the sea. Hades releases them to destroy Zeus. We see the rock titans that look like mountains saying, "Crush Zeus!" And he starts stepping on the farmland. And then the ice titan says, "Freeze Zeus! Freeze Zeus!" And we see him freeze a plain of horses, turning them into ice. And we see a bunch of horses in the ice, and then the lava monster melts, says, "Melt, Zeus!" And he goes through the city, and then and then the tornado titan says, "Blow him away," by taking out a building. And I love how the Titans are going there. So they're kind of going basically the wrong way. And um, Hades says, "Guys, Olympus is actually that way." And he points to them and he's like, "Zeus, Zeus." And they go to they follow him. They head over to the Olympus mountain. He goes and tells Zeus about the Titans coming to see Zeus on Mount Olympus. And then meanwhile, Zeus or Hermes is looking out over the uh, mountain, over Mountain Olympus, and sees that the Titans have escaped. And he goes over to talk to Zeus about the Titans escaping. And Zeus says, "Sound the alarm! Get everything you can. We need firepower and everything." And he's like, "Go, go, go!" And he's like, "Gone, babe." Uh, and then we basically get to see the Olympians uh, getting ready for battle. And then, meanwhile, we see Hades looks on by saying, "Boom, boom, boom, ba boom, ba boom." Meanwhile, the Cyclops is looking for Hercules because he says, because somehow uh, the Titans came out of the ground. He also had the Cyclops to sort of distract Hercules from taking over Mount Olympus, now that Hercules' strength is getting weak. So Hercules is goes and fights the Cyclops, and Meg says, uh, you'll be killed. And I like how Hercules says there are actually worse things. Uh, uh, and so Hercules is in Thebes. We get to see the town folks say, "Where's Hercules?" And then the old man says, "Yeah, Hercules will save us, save us," and the old man is actually looking at the statue, and the Cyclops just destroys the statue, and the Cyclops is saying, "Where is Hercules? Come out and play." And and Hercules goes and sees the Cyclops, and he says, "You are mighty Hercules," and goes down to him and takes his finger and flicks Hercules into the into the wall, and then billboard that says "Air Herc," uh, riding the teeth. He hears Pegasus whining, uh, or he hears, or Meg hears Pegasus whining, and Meg comes to free Pegasus to go and find Phil because he's the only one that can talk sense into Hercules. Meanwhile, the Titans are making their way to Mount Olympus as Zeus starts throwing, and Zeus starts throwing lightning bolts to defend the uh, the defend the castle. So then Meg takes Phil, or takes Pegasus, rides Pegasus to see Phil, and says to Phil, as he's about to get back on a boat to go to Thebes, he says, uh, or back home, Meg comes up to him and says, "Phil, Meg or Hercules is not listening to me. He needs you to talk some sense into him." And then Phil says, "Why does he need me for when he's got friends like you?" Hercules isn't listening to me. And I love what Phil says. He says, he's finally learned something. Meg says, "If we don't help him, Phil, Hercules will die." Back on Olympus, Zeus says he needs more thunderbolts, but finds out that everyone has been captured by the Titans. And Hades and Hermes tells Zeus about it, and that the Titans show up on Mount Olympus, and they crush um, the gates of Olympus, and the Titans turn up on Mount Olympus, and they use their lava power, their freeze power, and their rock power to sort of combine the elements to make Zeus into sort of a rock prison, and Hades and Hercules, and Zeus is like, "Hades, I had no idea you were behind all this." And Hades says, I'm gonna be the one making orders here, Bolt Boy." Uh, and Meanwhile, Hercules is getting tossed and tore up by Cyclops, kind of in a way a box, and then he's got he's kind of boxed against the columns like a boxer near the ropes, and and Hercules, or Phil shows up to give him some sort of support, saying that this guy is a pushover, the Cyclops. And Hercules in that moment of defeat says, "You were right, Phil. Dreams are for rookies." And Phil says, No, it's not. Giving up's for rookies." And he says, "I came back because I'm not quitting on you." And he's willing to go the distance for him. Then grab distance for him. Then Cyclops grabs Hercules, and you can see Hercules is beat up. He's got a black eye, and his cape is a mess. Hercules is then grabbed by the giant Cyclops, and he basically is in sort of his grasp, and he struggles and moves and tries to get there. He grabs uh, a torched flame, a torched wood, and uses the flame to uh, burn the Cyclops' eye. This releases him from getting um, out of the Cyclops' grasp. Hercules then uses strings of wood to, or uses some rope to knot Cyclops up so he could trip, while Phil and Pegasus cheer him on. And this tangles him up, making him fall down on the ground, killing the Cyclops. Then a column starts to weevil, and it's about to hit Hercules, but Meg gets out of the way and it crushes Meg. This angers Hercules, and Hercules says the heroic "No!" And then Hercules lifts up the boulder, and as he's lifting up the column, as he's lifting up the column, he regains his strength, and he's like, "Wait a minute, what's happening? What's going on?" And she's like, "Hades' spell is broken. I didn't want him. I didn't want me to get. He didn't want me to get hurt." And this is the moment where Hercules is basically back in action. So then Hercules goes and to basically back to Olympus to save the gods, while Phil is going to be watching over Hercules, or watching over Meg. So Hercules goes and gets he goes back on Pegasus and heads to Olympus, where the Titans and Pain and Panic have all captured the gods, and they're all being walked down Mount Olympus, and we see uh, Pain and Panic kind of in garbs of the gods. Panic is actually wearing Hermes' sunglasses, and meanwhile Zeus is uh, being trapped in his little volcano cocoon. And Zeus says, "When I get out of here," and Hercules or Zeus basically says, "When I get out of here, I'm going to," and Hades stops him by saying, "I'm tired of you making that I'll be making orders here now," and he starts to sit in sort of his own throne, and he serves up himself his own martini with with a worm in it, and he sips on the worm. And I love the line what Hercules says is, "Don't get too comfortable up there, Hades." And he sips it and chokes on it and sees Hercules coming down. Hercules frees the gods, rescues his father, rescues the gods. And what I love is that when he commands the Titans to get Hercules, and the Titans basically use um, uh, the Titans use their powers on Hercules to get him, but the lava hits Hades. Then and he's like, no, and Hades is like, no, not me, get him. And then Hercules. I love the scene because Hercules is flying through a bunch of ice pellets while the frost breather uh, is trying to freeze Hercules. He's going through. He's kind of dipping and dodging all the ice pellets and hitting them. And then Hercules, then the cold breath freezes Hades, and he says, "Go get the guy with the horse." Then he gets on the mountain that his father is cocooned in, and he uses his strength to break free of Hercules to Zeus. This basically, basically, now the good guys are ready for battle, are ready to kind of do their thing, and then I love the fact that Pegasus gets his revenge on Pain and Panic by basically using them as target practice, and um, they start kind of uh, he uses them as target practice. The we see Zeus get back in action with his lightning bolts, and he starts lightning bolting the Titans, and the um, Titans end up uh, Titans end up walking back to they're mostly retreating back through Mount Olympus, and Hades is like, guys, get your Olympic butts in gear, and take care of Zeus. And what I love is, and then there's a great scene where Pegasus shows up and blows out Hades' hair, and Hades like, "Oh, is my hair out?" And he says, "Oh, my hair out." Hercules takes, and I love the fact Hercules takes the tornado Titan and waves it around like it's like he just don't care. And it sucks up the other three Titans into a bowl. He whips it around with it around and throws it back into the cosmos, and it blows up in this great big supernova. Um, then Hercules and Zeus have a kind of a really good father-son moment where Hercules says, uh, but father-son moment where they kind of, high five each other after destroying the Titans, and Hades says, "I have one consolation prize for you." And she's dying to see you, and then he just kind of realizes, oh yeah, I forgot about Meg, and so he goes and races to Meg's Meg's body, but but he doesn't make it in time because the fates use the thread of light and use their scissors to cut the thread, and uh, uses the string of life to cut the threads. Uh, her. And I like how basically Hades says, "Don't forget about Mag. She's basically on her deathbed." Hercules heads down back to Mag while Mag is about to basically die because the Fates see her and their little orb, and they take the thread of life, and we see them go up, and it cuts the thread, and Hercules doesn't make it in time. And so and and Phil is watching over Meg before she ends up dying. We see Hercules try his best to get to Meg as the Fates scissors are about to um, cut the thread of life from Meg, because it has to get right in the middle, and the thread is cut, and Meg dies, and he barely makes it. And Phil looks at him and says, she's gone." And he just weeps over her. And then Meg, "Oh, can't believe you're gone." And Phil says, "I'm sorry, kid. There's just some things you cannot change." And then Hercules says, "Yes, I can." And then and then we're back in the underworld with Hades, and Hades is still pissed, as he should be, because all the Titans couldn't get um, couldn't get couldn't destroy Zeus, and he burns his whole like chessboard up, and he says, and he's like, it's all it is. And he basically blames Meg for going noble on them and on him, and then we see the three-headed dog that was at the beginning of at the beginning of the film. Hercules is riding him, and he's asked, "Where's Meg going?" And he asks her to let her go. And then this is a scene where uh, Meg's soul has been swimming in the river of death, where basically all the souls go to swim through eternity in the underworld. And he sees the soul of Meg, and he just goes, and Hercules goes and reaches for her. And and it's just a cool. I like the concept of the underworld being sort of a river, the river of the dead, and they just float for eternity. And the fact that when he takes his hands and puts it in the water, it's sort of kind of a Greek, not Greek, water. His hands turn old and decrepit. Hades says Meg's running with a new crowd. Hercules gets an idea, and he says, "You like making deals, don't you?" And he says, why don't you take me instead of Meg, in Meg's place?" And I like how Hades says, basically, the son of my hated rival swimming in a caution of death. And he says, "Going once, going twice. Okay, okay, sold. You go. Meg stays. You go." And you go. She goes, and Hercules stays. And so we watch Hercules as he swims through the river of death, and you see him gradually age as he gets closer and closer to Meg. He then goes to he goes, and as he's swimming, the Fates take the ball and basically give Hercules the thread of life, and they slowly move the scissors up to uh, cutting him so he would die. And as they're moving it up, he gets closer and closer to Meg, goes closer and closer to Meg, and ages older and older and older. He grabs um, Meg's hand, and the fates try to cut the string, and all of a sudden the thread won't cut. They think it's the scissors, but the thread won't cut, and we find out that Hercules has now got himself into godhood. And he basically, they're like, how can it be? And Hercules is like, how can that be? How can that be? And Hercules says he's got to be something of a god, and and then Hades says, how can it be? This is impossible. And Hades tries to, say, hey, Herc, I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry for what I did. Look, Herc, he's a fun guy. Good word with him, and kind of, he's trying to right his own wrongs. And Hercules, and he starts to sort of like, touch the soul and say, Meg, talk to him, talk to him. And then Hercules takes one fist and hits Hades back into the river of death, and he loses his hair, and the souls all go and attack him. And Hercules heads heads Hercules heads back to the real world, or back to Earth. We get to see Pain and Panic go, Hades is gonna kill us when he gets out. Only if he gets out. So then Hercules takes Hades. The Hercules puts the soul back into Meg, and Meg wakes up. She gets color back into her face, and Meg finally gets to see Hercules for what he really is, as a god. They kind of, and now that he's been in love, he finally gets a chariot cloud to take him up to Olympus. And this is where, and this is kind of the first time uh, Hercules goes to Olympus, and all the gods are cheering for him and saying, "Three cheers for the mighty Hercules!" And I love how Hermes is throwing out flowers for everybody, and Phil eats one, and basically, um, Phil eats one, and he is met with his father and mother who are waiting for him, and as he meets him, we really get to see a scene where Hercules, as an adult, really gets to talk to his mom about um, about kind of what he sacrificed for this young woman, and how she's proud of him. And then Zeus is proud of him as well, and he's done it. You've become a true hero, and and Zeus says a true hero is not measured by the uh, size of his heart, or size of his strength, but the size of his heart, but the strength of his heart. and he's kind of given a chance to go home and and kind of actually come back into um, Hercules or Olympus, and Hercules is like, well, a life without Meg, and he says that this is the moment I've always dreamed of, and we get to see like some of the other gods that are there, and he says, but with a life without Meg, even an immortal life, nothing um, would be part of it. Mortal life, and he says he wished to stay on Earth with her, and Zeus says it's okay, and they make him mortal, and they kiss, and basically Hercules has now got two homes. They can hang out at Mount Olympus or hang out back on Earth, and and what I like about it is the fact that this is the only moment we get to see Hercules really enjoy the godhood, or see, not the godhood, but see the uh, enjoy, having a moment in Olympus. And I like how he can go back and forth uh, from Olympus to the Earth, and he's kind of being, cheered on by the by the fans that he's always wanted, and he's still kind of friends with his adoptive family as well, and Zeus up in the sky makes. I love this scene because he makes the Hercules into the stars, and one of the guys says, "Hey, that's Phil's boy," and Phil kind of gets a teary eye, which is really nice. But I don't know, just the way it's animated, and I don't know. I just see Danny DeVito in that role. He starts to I kind of can believe it, and then that's kind of the ending of the film. Um, oh gosh, I like this movie. I'm kind of interested in seeing what. Uh, I like this movie. I give it a 8.9 out of 10. I've kind of look at it now as sort of as a um, as a classic for the Disney animated movie. But I liked it. I give it a 10. Next up is going to be I'll probably talk about the Expendables with Jay after these two things are coming up. So thank you guys so much, and if you like what you see, please like and subscribe. Peace.